Observe.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 19 of the Observe and Rapport Show. I'm Kyle Brennan, joined as ever by my beautiful co-host, Keith Sullivan. Keith, how are we doing today?
Couldn't be better, pal. Couldn't be better. The world's falling apart, but what are you going to do? It's falling apart.
Hey, happy Easter weekend.
Yeah, listen, it's...
When's Jesus coming back?
I don't know. I don't think he's here yet. He must have missed it. He must have overslept. It's just a lot of nonsense, huh? They're making a movie about it. Civil War. Did you see the preview for Civil War?
No.
Dude, you read too much. You got to get back on the phone and take a look at what's going on.
Where do you even see movie trailers anymore?
So as I scroll, I follow like cinema pages. So as I scroll, I'll see recommended for you movie trailer. Kirsten Dunst is in it. Some really fat black dude that everyone knows his face, but you don't know his name. Anyway, it's about America's new Civil War, and there's
it's based like modern day.
Yeah, it's a modern day Civil War, like how it would go about. And it's so funny. It says Texas and California are the resistance, and they're somehow teamed up, and I'm like, what would make them come together to fucking leave?
California's not resisting anything.
Yeah, they love it. They're like happy about everything, but and then there's the loyalist states, but it looks like a good movie. It looks really good.
That could be an interesting
concept, but that it's gotten to that point. You got two major wars. You've got the bridge collapse, and this is the thing about that, man. When I hate now that nothing can happen ever again. Now it's it was done. It was an inside job. What they did it because the bridge is all of a sudden everyone's like a geopolitical or geoeconomic person, and they know what bridges are the most important for income and outcome, and everyone's like, that bridge, it's responsible for so much supply and for the cities and major distribution, and they're trying to fuck up the infrastructure.
No one knew a thing about that bridge.
No one gave a shit. That bridge? First of all, it didn't look that nice. It looked like honestly looked like a piece of shit bridge.
I went to school in Baltimore. I used to drive over that bridge.
So is it a piece of shit? Very not big. No big deal.
Honestly, I didn't even remember driving over that bridge, and I had to Google it and be like, "Did I drive over that?"
Right. The nothing can happen ever again. That was an inside job.
So true, but also, just how crazy how fast the bridge fell down,
like a Jenga tower. It just.
I thought I was watching it in fast motion.
You see, now it's because there were explosives on the.
I don't think that was a conspiracy. It was just it clearly.
It really did. It looked like it was just sped up.
It was just
the video.
Yeah, it felt like the boat maybe just hit it in the perfect spot of weakness, but
compromise.
It's so true though. My immediate reaction, my dad texted me because I went to school in Baltimore, and I Googled it. And I was just like, oh, wow, that must have been a huge fuck up for whoever was driving the boat, or some mishap must have happened. And I went about innocently for the rest of my day, and then scroll on Instagram, and I just see all of these conspiracies, and my eyes sort of light up because I'm like, ooh, that's an interesting concept. I didn't think of that.
And you know what? Maybe it is, but the thing is, it's just, there's never going to be a world where it just wasn't, and everything was just an accident.
Everyone assumes no foul play.
Someone said that it was a Ukrainian driving, which might even be true, but just of course they're Ukrainian. Now that means there's some weird.
You know what I felt like a perfect example of this, and it's not necessarily conspiracy based, but just Taylor Swift in the NFL.
She can't have a boyfriend.
She just every little detail was scrutinized.
Remember the whole thing? What they were like? That's why they say this has been a presentation, man, because it's a choreographed show. Yeah. It's not really a game.
They're paying her to go to the games. They want more coverage. But you can't just be like, can't a girl just go watch her boyfriend play?
I put a poll out recently on my story. I was like, I get ridiculous with the stories, but one of the selections was, I feel like Taylor Swift's getting a bad rap. Let the girl live. Why is everyone why is she my enemy?
The fact that you're spending that much time hating someone is just who gives a shit?
Yeah. So the world's falling apart, but I'm reading a book by Ray Dalio. You're familiar with Ray Dalio?
Yeah, Principles and The Changing World Order. That's are his
exactly
two books.
It. The other one, he came up with another one recently. But he started Bridgewater. He's a super successful hedge fund guy, Wall Street, whatever. And in the book, he talks about the world orders that have existed in the past, and a world order is really just whatever country is the reserve currency Like whatever country has the reserve currency domination of the whole world, meaning
so before us, it was like the British Empire.
Yeah.
Before them, it was the Chinese.
the Dutch.
Dutch.
The Dutch, they beat the what was it? The Habsburg something empire.
Habsburgs, yeah.
The Habsburgs, exactly. And then they took over. But your reserve currency, it's basically just when your money is the most widely distributed and used money in the world. And so people also want to save in your dollars. So people from all over the world are saving in American dollars. And so that creates a dependency on that person. And that country usually takes the highest point, or the hierarchy is at the top of the mountain for the world order. Now, there's been multiple world orders. Like we were just talking about, there was the one with the Dutch. They kind of ran the show from 1570 to like 1650. After the 80 Years' War, they took dominance over the whole planet because they also invented ships, and that got the whole trade route thing going. And then after them, it was the British from like, what was it, from like 1700 to like 1850. The Victorian era was like 1850. After that, it fell apart. And by 1900, we took the gavel, and we were like, all right, it's our bitch now. But he goes into the fact that this is all cyclical.
Yeah.
This has all happened multiple times throughout recorded history, that like a country usually lasts between 100, 150 years at the top. Things go a certain way every time, and like we're on the way out. So it's just there's comfort knowing that this isn't the first time. This isn't some conspiracy. Like it's almost just the way it is.
It's funny because I remember like back in like elementary school reading about the British Empire, and then like the American Revolution, and the U.S. basically like took over as a world power. And as a little kid, I couldn't comprehend. I'm like, well, what happened to the people in England?
Right? Did they stop working?
Were they just like depressed and sad, and no one worked anymore?
It's a gradual thing.
Yeah, but like,
it's a gradual thing.
I used to think when they said like the collapse of the Roman Empire,
the word collapse makes you think everyone's dying.
Because everyone's talking about the U.S. like, oh, we're collapsing like the Roman Empire. And to me, when I was a kid, I thought that just meant like everyone was just dying in the streets, and like everyone was destitute, had no idea what to do. And it's like, no, you just gradually fade out and another power takes over. But like
exactly,
England's still doing well, you know, like the Dutch
are
still doing well.
Like it's gonna be China.
It's like what we talked about in the last episode. We talked about the rational optimists, right? And how things just gradually improve over time, but also just the importance of understanding our current time. Yeah, when people like dramatize or like go crazy about what's going on in this current political moment, how it's like the end of democracy or whatever like that, and you read these books about human psychology and history, and it just puts everything into context where it's just like, no, right now, like the current climate, it seems like it's at a boiling point. It's not that much different than it was 60 years ago, or
and if anything
150 years ago. Like it's human nature, and if you know how people behave in groups, if you know how people behave in positions of power, you know how reactive people are to catastrophe or to disaster or to war, you see these trends, and you can kind of, I don't know if it makes you optimistic, but it just makes you less interested and involved.
It's going to be okay.
It makes you realize like, oh, like one, it's going to be okay, and two, I can't do anything about it.
Right.
It's just
that's really the
it's going to play out.
That's the comfort for me. It's like this is the natural order of things. Really, this is going to play out. And he even points out in the book that one of the things that keeps things from getting out of hand socioeconomically, when the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, which has been the case here for decades now. As long as the standard of living for the poorer person in that scenario isn't going down, like even if theirs is skyrocketing, the general feeling among the public is, well, at least my life isn't getting worse. And nowadays with Netflix and Uber Eats and all this shit that we have at our fingertips, there's never going to be a revolution where you and I are like pounding Elon Musk's door down. Like it's just not going to happen, because ultimately it's not peasant and royalty anymore. Yeah, it's everyone's kind of all right. So. And even the last time this happened, in like the 40s or whatever, when we took over, really, that was like the big, after the Roaring '20s and the Depression, when we became like the ultimate superpower for the whole world. Even when that happened, like you said, like it's not like everyone in England died. They just, they weren't number one anymore. Mm-hmm. Can't win forever. Yeah. The thing about the top of the mountain, there's not a lot of air up there, right? Not a lot of oxygen. So you can't stay for long. That's the analogy. It's like You know what I mean? Like,
very good.
Once you're up there, something's going to start to choke.
Yeah.
And something's got to get like sacrificed and
That's very true.
subtracted at some point because you become too big to maintain.
Yeah.
And then
the cover of the book is literally a bell curve chart.
Right.
Which is exactly
and he literally shows
how,
them he masks over every, this happened in Japan and France and basically every country, and like they all have the same thing. It's like
it's very similar. I haven't read this book, but my friend Zoop, shout out to Zoop, recommended this book to me called The Fourth Turning. I've seen it in bookstores and I've wanted to buy it, but it's basically it's almost like a drill down of what Ray Dalio talks about. How every
long book, 600 pages.
The Fourth Turning, or
no, Ray Dalio.
Yeah, it was honestly. I think I finished the whole thing. Though.
Did you?
Or I might have skipped around.
Yeah.
Some parts get monotonous, but The Fourth Turning, it's about the cycles of every civilization, effectively. So it's like there's 4 stages of it, and I might butcher it, but I think it's 80-year cycles. Or it might be shorter. I don't remember. But every country goes through it. In the U.S., it goes through it in like the British Empire, very similar to Ray Dalio. But it's like these 80-year stages of growth. And this is, we're currently, why everyone feels like everything's changing so much. And he explains how it's like, no, we're just in the 4th turning, like the 4th stage that every other society has gone through. And he's like, here's what you can expect and everything like that. So I want to read that book next because it's very topical.
It is interesting. It opens your eyes too to like how money really is the root. I know this is the thing of like root of all evil, but it's kind of the root of everything. Like it influences
the economy.
It influences everyone's behavior, whether you have money or don't. Like you will be affected by the constraints and the pushes and pulls in either direction, whether it's a good economy or a bad one. And that guy, it sounds like because like Ray just kind of talked about that and the economic thing too. Like he talks about in a pretty decent amount of detail what happens culturally where there's the resentment, right? And then that builds like political disputes. Like it's your fault. The right thinks the left is lazy and the left thinks the right is greedy. And realistically, it's really no one's fault. Like there are people yelling on both sides and they're both right because they're both talking about the inevitability that we're going down.
Well, you know what? I
it is what it is.
Yeah. I forget who I was listening to recently, but they were talking about obviously the cons of communism and socialism and stuff like that, how there's always going to be a wealth disparity and it never works out. But he was also explaining, he's like, yes, capitalism is the best system that we have, but inherent in capitalism, there will always be a rich class and a poor class.
Because it's the natural way.
It's the natural way. It's incentives. And the people...
The 80-20 principle.
There's always going to be 20% of people who work their ass off to be that top percent, and there's always going to be the opposite. He's like, the benefit of capitalism is that it's the only system where the bottom 80% have the ability or the easiest path to become that top 20% by working hard, by being entrepreneurial, by the systems that we have in place to just make it easier to start a business. So it was interesting to hear him say that, of just like, there's always going to be a wealth disparity.
Yes.
And it's the fact that we actually strive to make it as easy as possible to shrink that, the two extremes and make the barbell smaller effectively.
Yeah. He talks about how also to the communist point in the book, famously, because like the Chinese did a great job of implementing a capitalist communist mix society. And when they asked Deng Xiaoping, I think that was his name, he was the chairman of the Chinese whatever, not the Communist Party, the other thing.
Yeah, I've heard the name.
And when they asked him about, how did you do that? And he famously said, it doesn't matter if it's a white cat or a black cat as long as it catches mice. And what he meant, and then he also said, and it's also really fun to be rich. So that's what he said. Wow. So it was famously said, like, I think he said this in the 50s, but
it's interesting when you start to learn about, like you said, how money really is.
It's everything.
The economy is what creates all of this world order, really. It's how it changes, right? It's like the country who starts opening up for trade, who has the best, geopolitical landscape. Like the U.S. was so perfect because we have oceans on both sides, we have mountains in the middle, we have grain fields, we have deserts, we have every type of possible area to produce crops, to do manufacturing in the U.S. And then over time, that gets expensive, and then you start offshoring into other countries who can do it cheaper. You start international trade, and then like slowly you realize, oh shit, we've offshored a little too much. And like that's just one sector of the huge pie of the economy is like international trade. And you just see that natural progression of just like, okay, now, yeah, we could stop offshoring and like outsourcing to Indonesia and Taiwan for our clothes, but now everything's going to be more expensive. So it's like, you can't do that. So we're stuck.
And
it's
then, dude, it's amazing. Dalio does a great job. He talks about like that happens, like you just said. And then also what happens is people from those other countries that were poor are still technically poorer than you. The people that live there come here to work for cheap. So now the rich people who live in America are paying less for things to happen. And that makes the money just more and more, it devalues it more and more over time. Plus that's happening. Like we're borrowing to pay ourselves back. Yeah. And like, it just becomes this financial bubble, but on like a global scale. And then it's just, maybe it popped already. Maybe it did. And we just kind of like are fizzing out from it. And it's just going to be the Chinese soon. The thing that's scary about it is, and Robert Spalding wrote a book on this too. He's a general. And like this can become just like a war, like a literal war where the Chinese are like, yo, listen, like there's no reason why we can't be number one. Like you fucked up. Like there's no reason now. And like whether it's a war that does it or like re-signing of treaties and shit like that and whatever, that shit will get it worked out. So that's the part where people get scared and they're like, oh, politics are so fucking important. You got to vote, like whatever it is. But still, this is going to happen, whether it's a peaceful transition of power or a violent one.
Do you think war in the sense of sending people to other countries is going to be around for much longer?
Yeah, I played a video game once, and those are always like 100% accurate. But the point is, in Fallout 4, there's a quote that says, "War never changes." And it sounds stupid, like a regular sentence even, not a quote, but like it's profound in that for that kind of level of a willingness to do that to another place, for that to actually be on the table, technology and resources have gotten so low to a point where that's not ridiculous anymore. Like that is actually the next step. Like right now, as America stands and China stands as like how we're doing, no, because there's no reason. But if we got into a conflict where we were using drone strikes and this and that for the first few years, eventually things would deteriorate technologically to where you got to send people in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's the thing, is that war never really changes because once things deplete to a point, it becomes like, I'm going to slit your throat, literally.
Yeah,
you know
it's
what I
like
mean?
that chilling Einstein quote where he says, he's like, World War III will be fought with nuclear.
With sticks and stones.
But World War IV. Or
No, I'm sorry.
I think you're right.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
basically
yes.
the last
Please
war.
say it,
the last war will be fought with sticks and stones.
Yes. World War III will be fought with nukes. World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. Right. Yeah.
The first time I heard that, I was like, I was young, so I didn't really understand it, but I knew. I was like, damn, that's deep.
And listen, like, there's all these people talking about conspiracies that, like, the whole immigration thing. Like, there's Brett Weinstein's going on and on, man, about how they're all Chinese military-aged men and they're buying farmland around military bases, like, by the hundreds. And I'm like, Jesus.
That's another thing.
You know what I mean?
You could keep going down the
you can go forever.
The rabbit hole of conspiracies.
But, like, I think that this transition will just be, I don't know what it'll be, but it's coming, and it is what it is. And it's not our fault. It's not the liberals' fault. It's not anyone's fault. It's just kind of like what happens. Historically, it's cyclical. It is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I think about even just like reading the textbooks of history, like in school, and like the Roman Empire. You had, for some reason, you had to know all the emperors. Right, yeah. Like you could probably name right now like 10 Roman emperors.
Caligula, was he an emperor?
Yeah, Caligula, like Nero, and like whatever. And I feel like now with like, not to say Donald Trump is comparable to those people, but I feel like in the history textbooks 200 years from now, and they talk about the collapse of the U.S.
Yeah.
Right. It's like the name Donald Trump is going to be known by kids in schools.
Yeah.
200 years from now,
he's now a populist president in that. Again, the country has gotten to this dipping point where the culture is so divided because now we're blaming everybody for what's going on left and right. So it creates populism. It creates like, Donald Trump's our savior. That's why people think he's literally God. Like they think he's actually going to save their lives. Like people are really I've heard people say to my face, if he doesn't get into office, we're all going to die. You know that. And I'm like,
my favorite thing, because like people get so hysterical about politics. And I saw like this weekend I was at a party and just like people were like literally at each other's throats, like so unbelievably just like armored around their whatever, like the opposite happens, the world is going to shit, the country's going to collapse, the streets are going to be on fire. And like my favorite quote was Bill Burr in 2016, right after Donald Trump got elected. He's on Conan O'Brien, and Conan, it kind of just asks him like, what do you think about, Donald Trump getting elected? Everyone's saying, it's like the end of democracy. And like Bill Burr just like leans back and he's like, the fuck are you gonna do? He's like, when was the last time the president affected your daily life? Is the president calling you up on the phone and like changing your life? It's like, no, you still live your life day to day, like no different. You're still going to get a bagel and a coffee in the morning. Right. That's going to work, like and it was just such perfect thing. He's like, is he calling you on the phone? Right. It's like, no.
This has happened. Things were like people always talked about Nixon with the gold thing, like when he changed the gold standard. Yeah, FDR did the same shit. And like no one talks about it because it wasn't that big of a deal, I guess. But like it was the same thing where we were defaulting and like we couldn't pay anything back. So we just said, listen, we're going to print a shit ton of money that we don't actually have. And I'm just letting you guys know, okay? And gold has nothing to do with it anymore. Like, it's just like this has happened. It's happened. We're not special. And like luckily now there's McDonald's and Netflix. So even if World War III is going on, remember that video that was circulating recently where there was a revolution in France and like the whole block was on fire and like poetically people were sipping espresso at a table next to it, because like it's just like every day
perfectly French.
There's a great picture of after the Blitzkrieg Bop or whatever the fuck it's called, when they bombed the shit out of London and the guy was at the library looking through like a hole in the wall, like at books. He was like, no one.
I read a book, which one was it? It was one of the Eric Larson books, The Splendid and the Vile, maybe, where they talk about the London bombings. Yeah. And it's written, or part of the chapters is written in the perspective of like just a regular lady who was just like literally going to work. They were going to parties. Like they were actually like,
what are you going to do?
People were having a lot of sex back then.
Hell
yeah. It was just like you didn't know if you were going to die.
Yeah.
And it was just crazy to read. Like you think when you hear about the London bombings, like, oh, the whole city must have been shut down and people were
crying and tragic.
No, they were going out. They were going to work. They're going partying. They're drinking. They're like going over each other's houses and smoking cigarettes.
I remember when COVID was going on and it was bad COVID.
That's the perfect example.
Dude, it was like bad where like it was crack addicts and homeless people having sex on the sidewalk and like doing drugs right in front of you. And like
I was drinking margaritas in the street.
Dude, I was sitting, I'll never forget, I was with my coworker. We're on shift. This is at my old building, sorry. I don't work there anymore. But we were on shift and like, but it was like, it's such a joke. Work was such a joke because like, it's like, what are we even doing here? And like, everyone's like, I mean, there was like, the riot had become such a everyday thing. Like, it was like, we all knew it was at 7:00 tonight. Like, it's an event. Like, everyone's like, oh, the riot's starting soon. We got to get out of here. Like, at least we knew that. And like, I remember sitting there and, with a beer on the sidewalk in the street, drinking beer with my coworker. And across the street, there was a bunch of homeless people literally harassing a cop, like saying, you ain't gonna do shit. You ain't gonna do shit because you know you're gonna get fucked up if you do. And like they're like, like shaking their drugs like this. And I'm like, this is dystopian. Dystopian. Yeah. The whole world is on fire. Like everything's and this is in the middle when we didn't know everything was gonna be okay. Like even I was like, yo, like I'm a little scared. Like, but like my point is, if you just you figure it out and you just pour a bottle and you'll be all right.
Yeah, we're incredibly adaptable species. We're
very adaptable.
Things become normal so fucking quickly.
Yeah.
I always tell the story of like I remember me and Lauren did our mini moon because it was during COVID. We went to Arizona and there was a couple sitting next to us and they were like, oh yeah, we found a scorpion in our room last night. And me and Lauren are like sort of freaking out. We're like, what the fuck? Like we go back to our room, we're like checking it. And the guy's just like, yeah, no, I got bit by a scorpion once on the side of the road. I was cycling on the highway, got bit. I was the left side of my body went numb for about 3 days, but I was fine after that. And I'm just like, what?
Yeah.
But then me and Lauren started talking. It's like, because these people were from Arizona, scorpions were just like a regular thing. They're used to it.
Yeah, it's a firefly. And I was like, it's horsefly.
And I'm like, I'm sure if we grew up in Arizona, we would think scorpions are normal too. So it's just incredible how like whatever environment you're in, you just adapt to it.
You got to figure it out.
It's normal.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
You know? So what have you been reading?
I've read a few books recently, but I actually read a really good article this morning. Oliver Burkeman, he wrote 4,000 Weeks.
Yeah, you've talked about him. You read that book already, right?
That was one of my favorite books, probably not just of last year, but like that I've ever read. He just has a very unique sense of like how he treats time and productivity, and it's not. I always tell people it's the name of the book. It's like 4,000 Weeks Time Management for Mortals. It has nothing to do with like here's how to structure your day. It's actually a very philosophical like stop worrying about being productive. He wrote an article called Maybe You'll Never Get on Top of Everything. And he writes about this concept of productivity debt. And it's a feeling I'm sure you have, I definitely have, I'm sure most people have, which is this feeling of like, once I get this done, then I will feel some sense of pride or nirvana or like accomplishment. And you pretty much feel like that almost every day, where you're starting at a deficit and you need to start doing things in order to feel like you're being productive and moving on. And it's not just about work and tasks. It's also like maybe your relationship or your friendships. Like as you get older, you feel like you need to like, schedule something or do something and like complete tasks. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of this like, I think it's deferred happiness syndrome, where you always feel like what you're doing now is unlocking your best life. And like as if you're biding your time now, you're like, yeah, but now things aren't good, but they will be,
It's so ridiculous.
And it's like, I'm sure we all deal with this sort of sense. And it was such a refreshing article. And he wrote something of stop having a to-do list and start writing a done list, which is your to-do list. When you have it and you have like 7 things on it, you feel like you're in debt, like you owe those things, and it creates a sense of anxiety, like I have to get these things done. He says instead, what if you started with a 0 balance and you had a blank sheet of paper at the beginning of the day, and as you did things, whatever it might be, you write it down of a list of things that you accomplished that day, even if it's like I brushed my teeth, and like so you're actually building things, because alternatively you could have just been a lazy piece of shit and sat in bed all day, but you actually made your coffee. You went outside for a walk or whatever you did. But I really liked this refreshing look, because it made me realize how often I do this, of having this feeling like, once I do these 3 things in the next year, then I'll feel happy and I'll be. And I feel like starting jiu-jitsu recently is like a perfect example, like because of the belt system. It might take you 10 years to get a black belt. So right now I'm a 2-stripe white belt, which means it'll probably take me another 8 months to a year to get my first next belt, which is a blue belt. And right now, every day I go to jiu-jitsu and I'm like, once I become a blue belt, then I'll feel like I've mastered it. But I know the day I get my blue belt,
it's about the yellow belt.
It's going to start, the purple's next. It's like, it's going to start over. And this article is very refreshing, because it's like, no, I should stop looking at it like I'm, paying a debt to what my future will be, but rather, these are the golden years right now. When you look back in 10 years, you're going to look back at the time when you were a white belt and like appreciate those days. So I'm trying to. That article just gave me a nice refresh.
It reminded you.
Yeah.
There's a great page on Instagram called Philosophy LOL. It's like it's a meme page, but unless you know philosophy, you're not going to get the jokes. And I mean, some of them are like kind of like whatever, but one of the memes was like that sad guy meme face, and it's a thought bubble, and it's him thinking about like the past or whatever. Somehow they insinuate that it's the past. And then the next slide is that picture in the thought bubble having the same thought bubble about the past.
Yeah.
And it's like you're always constantly romanticizing the past too, as if, so for that to be logically true, even what we all suffer from every day, in 3 years I'll be fine. Well, it's not like you're not 3 years old. Like you've had 3 years ago happen to you 7 times already, and you still think you're not happy.
Yeah.
But you used to think, in 3 years, I know I'll be financially fine. I'll be stressed out, no stress. But it's not true. It's all about the moment. Like Actually, I was just watching my wedding video, and my best man, buddy, the best guy ever, he said, he said something great. He said, it's hard to appreciate the moments. That's why you should turn every moment into a good memory, because that's what we tend to like kind of focus on is our memories, right? And like, so as long as you live the moment as your best self, doing the best thing, the right thing all the time, you'll constantly have memories to look back on and all that. And I'm like,
it's like what we talked about with Die with Zero, the memory dividends. Right?
Memory dividends, exactly.
You retire on your memories. So why you need to build a life that has a great collection of memories that you look back on.
It's like it's a hack around this behavior that we're talking about now, is to always have a good life. So you always go, oh, that was
Alex Hormozy had a mic drop.
By the way, I love him. I badmouthed him once. I didn't badmouth him, but I said, who is this fucking jacked guy talking about like never drinking again? But he's actually fantastic.
You know, he's very similar to like a Gary Vee. Yeah. Where it's like kind of annoying and a little bit
his one-liners are like...
His one-liners are amazing. But dude, one of my favorite one-liners that he said was, you already accomplished the things you said would make you happy.
Exactly.
And I was like, damn, it's
so true. Yeah. It's so true.
It's like even like I bought a house and I'm like, I remember probably 5 years ago, I'm like, you know, once we move out of the city in this like small apartment and we get a house, you know, then we'll feel like we're set and we're happy. And now I'm in a house and I'm just like, you know, once I have enough money to like really redo the rooms that I want to do, you know, once we finish the basement, then it just never ends. So you just realize like, oh.
Even over the weekend, but you know, Easter, you see family, you spend time with family. I think my wife said something like, about achieving your dreams and like you can do it and whatever. She's so supportive and great and whatever. But like, it made me say, without even thinking about it, I was like, well, yeah, you're achieving micro dreams all the time. Like, I'm married, I have a kid, and like, she's amazing, and like, I have a good job, like this job that I thought I'd never have. Like, as far as like, you know, there was a time where I was literally worried about what the fuck am I gonna do with my life? Like, I'm not gonna make any money. Like, and now it's like, you know, but you, like you said, you already achieved all these incredibly impossible almost things, and like, your relationships are all like whatever, assuming that everything's in a good spot. Like, there's no point in being like, no, in 2 years, like it's now. It's like it's now.
Yeah. It's like when you look back. Do you ever look back at a picture of yourself when you're like 23? You're like, damn, I look good.
Yeah.
But when you got that picture when you were 23, oh my God, you were probably like, oh, I look like shit.
I'm fat. Like whatever.
Like I saw like Lauren was showing me a picture of her and her sisters on a vacation, like I don't know, like 10 years ago in Aruba. And they all have like 6-pack abs on the beach. So like, and she was like, I remember that vacation, all of us being like, oh, we're so fat.
Don't post it.
And it's like, like you're never satisfied with like, which is a good thing, right? You're always striving to be better, but like, it's very it's important. Easier said than done to say like appreciate right now, you know, enjoy the journey.
Totally. And that is eye rolly, but like it's so true. It really is true. You can't, because again, it logically makes no sense to do anything else. It's so true.
Yeah, and like you have a kid, so what's interesting, I was joking with my buddy. He had at the time it was his 2-week-old son, and it was hilarious because we were joking like, oh, this is his first time sitting at a dinner table.
Right.
This is his first time that he like rolled on the couch
every day,
and we were just like joking about, oh, it's his first time he saw like a guitar, and like. You're like, how cool is it that
his first time?
Like you literally everything he's doing is his first time doing it.
The joy, like. Here's the thing. I said this to my wife the other day. Like, I almost feel bad. I can't say that because not everyone's on the same page, and that's okay. But like, at a certain age, I feel like the holidays lose their magic, right? Like, at a certain age, it kind of becomes Easter. Okay.
Yeah. When did your parents stop giving you an Easter basket?
Oh my God, I was probably 15 years ago now, you know, like, so like, what has Easter meant for me since then? Absolutely fucking nothing. I mean, like, I know he is risen and all that, but I didn't even become like slightly religious even until very recently. So like, Easter's like this, she's like, oh my God, like the Easter egg hunt, she's running around looking for the things, like it brings the joy back. Like you look at it and you go, this is amazing. Like, we're all
that's
here.
Why we do it.
Yeah, this is why we do it, because it's for the kids, it's for them. And then she gets the Easter basket and now she knows the word bunny because she had to learn it, like 5 days of just bunny. And like you're watching her, you know, now we're in the store and she sees a bunny and you're like, oh, you just learned that. Like, it's all, you remember why. And I feel like people who don't have that, not that you don't, you know what I mean? Like, you have plenty of young people in your life, but if you have no like rejuvenation of the genetics going, it just loses its piss life.
Right.
You know, like where's the future? You see it in them and you're like, this is amazing. So yeah, Christmas, all that shit becomes magical again.
Yeah, I feel like seeing things through a kid's eyes too also just re-sparks some of the feelings you had when you were like 2-3 years
totally.
old.
Dude, the little wind up and they hop around. Dude, they're like they can't believe what they're seeing, and like you go, it is awesome.
Like I remember just watching like my nephew, he's never bored. Like there's not a single like half second where he is bored and like doesn't have something to do or isn't excited by something that he wants to play with or look at or run around for. And it just brought back that memory of me being that kid. I'm like, oh, I remember when my day was filled with just wonder and curiosity and like looking around stuff. And I'm like,
and it's amazing. Like we were in the backyard playing wiffle ball, and she's like trying to hold a wiffle ball bat, and I'm like, she's gonna get to learn how to hit a ball.
Yeah,
like that feeling of that ting and when you hit a home run, dude. Like that's the greatest feeling you'll ever have in your life in a weird way. And she's gonna get to feel that for the first time one day, I'm sure. And then we got our like these mini golf clubs, and she's like trying to hit the ball, and like they don't even know how to hold the fucking stick yet.
Yeah,
and that's beautiful because then they're gonna learn how to do that.
Because that's those are the things that gives you that fresh perspective of appreciating those little things. Because you don't want to become like, oh, she learned how to hold a wiffle ball bat. Now I won't be happy until she learns how to swing it.
Right.
Then I won't be happy until she learns how to hit a ball. But you don't think like that.
No, you don't.
But you do in your daily life, right?
Yeah. Like to yourself, you do that all day.
Like if you pick up a golf club and you go play, you're like, oh, now I won't be happy until I can hit this well.
If I don't break 100 today, this was a waste of time.
Golf is actually a perfect metaphor.
It's a perfect metaphor for everything.
Yeah, because I mean, it's
like
just,
chess. It's like
Yeah, you will never perfect it.
No.
Yeah,
you can always be better and all that. But I saw you were. I'm just curious. I don't know if you want to talk about it, but I saw you were reading like a Buddhist.
Yeah, Siddhartha. Siddhartha by Herman Hesse. It was written in like 1922. I'd always heard.
Oh, so it's not like it's a novel.
It's like an allegory, kind of like The Alchemist, if you've ever read that.
Yes, I read The Alchemist.
So it's kind of like a Buddhist text, basically about this guy named Siddhartha who goes on a journey, leaves his father and his home to go try to achieve enlightenment and peace. And I won't go into the book. I literally just finished it this morning.
Like Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Because there's like the
yes, a little bit.
He's out there trying to find the
actually very similar. Yeah. So. Essentially he runs in, he meets the Buddha, and like the Buddha tells him basically the secret to like happiness and enlightenment. And Siddhartha realizes like, well, the Buddha has such this energy and presence that his words don't mean anything to me. Like him telling me what to do, he's like, I need to experience it myself because he clearly experienced it all. Himself. So I need to go live my life like that.
It's ineffable in order
so
you need to feel it.
He goes on this journey and he meets other people and he finds like a girl and all this stuff, and he learns it through that process. And then at the end, he's like sitting on a river and he finally like listens to the river and effectively like learns that, oh, like I think I understand it now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not obvious in the text, but it's almost like reading the best I can compare it to is just like when you're sitting on the top of like a mountain after like a long hike and you have this gorgeous view and you kind of just sit there and it might be 2 seconds, but you just feel it.
Yeah.
And that's how it is reading the book. It's like kind of like constantly having that view.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I can't say it to you, like what the message is.
Yeah.
But when you
that's
read
almost the point, right?
Yeah, when you read it, you're like, it's just a refreshing like view, the book. It's an interesting experience because it's not like I can't go and tell you what the book's about, but you have to experience it.
Weird to bring him up from this, but Will Smith, he was just being interviewed by someone and they asked him, what's the meaning of life? And he was like, okay. And then he goes, in a very Will Smith like way, he just like made it so serious for a second and was like, well, it's this. And he goes and says nothing. And he's just sitting there staring at him like this. And the guy's like, what? And he's like, and it's just completely quiet. And then he goes, okay. And then he goes, now a picture, bird's eye, us sitting here, not talking and looking at each other. And then the guy does that, and then and so he sets him up in this like meta setting now, and then they're sitting there in silence for like 30 seconds, and then Will Smith says something to the effect of like, "That's the meaning of life," and it's like I think what he was trying to say is like it's just this silent contentness with yourself and what you're doing, and like calm, kind of, and like I was like, I don't. That could be like people. I didn't even go to the comments because I'm sure everyone's just bashing him. But I'm like, I get what he was trying to do there. That's the point of it. Just sit there and shut up and appreciate what you're doing.
What I have to Google it because did you see the one where it's like it's Keanu Reeves on Stephen Colbert?
Oh yeah,
and he's like, "What do you think happens when we die?" Mm-hmm. And Keanu just like
says, "I know."
He said, "The people. I know that the ones who love us will miss us."
Yeah, no.
I'm like, damn, that's it.
That's it. Yeah, and that's the concept, not to get like crazy, but that's what heaven is for me, like metaphorically anyway, is like, people are like, you really believe you go sit on a fucking cloud and take a harp lesson? What are you, fucking crazy? Like, I get that. It's like, I don't. But what I think the concept of heaven really means, like the whole thing, you will live for eternity. Like, if you live your life and conduct yourself a certain way, your name will last longer. Because people will talk about you. Oh, my dad, Keith was the best, like whatever. Like your name will live on through your generations, through your family. Like if you live life in the Christian sense too and get married and have children, like I see my face every day now, not in the mirror. It's me. It's crazy. And like, you live on, you live eternally in that sense. Like it's a metaphorical way of living forever, right? Like being a good person, having your name not be tainted by bad things. So
I was actually thinking about this the other day, which was like, it's interesting because I never met my great grandparents, right? They were too old, and like my grandparents are passed away, so my kids will not have great grandparents either. And it's interesting, like I know literally like nothing about my great grandparents because that was like over 100 years ago, essentially. Like the peak of their lives was 100 years ago. So there's like no record of them.
Yeah.
Right. So I can only get the occasional story from my dad, who he didn't even know them well. And I think what's interesting about our current generation is that there actually will be a record of us.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
You think about that with the YouTube channel, dude? Like, there's hours of us. They
talking. Have this, like,
high quality audio and video.
Our great grandkids, hopefully, in 150 years, can actually know who we were and understand.
That's very bizarre.
Like, my great grandfather did this,
had these opinions,
and now I'm
this personality
doing this, and like I could see some of the similarities. So like that's really cool.
Yeah,
I have no idea what my great grandfather looks like, or
talk about like this. Like we'll be beyond the grave, and this will still be somewhere. Hopefully, I mean, I don't know, but
what is it? I think it's like to go back 300 years. It's only 8 people ago.
Yeah,
or something like that. So imagine just a room of 8 people of your ancestors. It's only 8 people, like to 300 years ago.
Yeah, have you thought about that yet? Like that we're gonna let's just say tragically if something happens, it's like there's plenty of you.
Yeah,
at least video anyway.
And
it's
audio. It's not like I'm doing it. It's not like I'm doing it for that reason.
Course not, but I thought that the other day. I was like, there's 19 hours at least now of us having in depth.
There is definitely a part of me that will occasionally think about that as I'm writing or publishing a blog or something. I'm like, oh, like someone in my family, an ancestor of mine who I don't know and may never meet, might read this someday.
See this or read this.
I'm like, that's really cool and weird at the same time.
Yeah, and it's and maybe even to wrap it up, in the book he shows those graphs with the arcs, going back to Ray Dalio's book, and like it just reminds me that like I think we have this problem that we'll never get out of as a species, where we create systems and build things that are really just big people. Like I work in a building, and the building has a heart. It has the machine room, and it has the pipes, which are the veins, and all these things depend on pressure, which is like your blood pressure and all these things. Like we can't get out of that box of like creating something. And our lives are an arc. There's the peak, there's the rise, and then there's this moment where you become too big to maintain, or not, big meaning that like you're too complicated to maintain and that your energy consumption doesn't meet your output, and now you're starting to decline and you're starting to die, and then all of a sudden, and just like a country, when the dip hits a certain point, it really dips quickly, and that's when people get really sick and they die, whatever. And I'm like, So it's all inevitable. It's all cyclical. Systems, people, lives.
That
never ends.
That couldn't have been a more perfect tee up for the book that I also read, which is
I love teeing you up.
Outlive by Dr. Peter Attia.
Love it.
Really cool book.
He's the best.
It's like a textbook. So if you're not, I don't know, if you're not willing or want to read like a lot of scientific stuff about, molecules and ApoB cells, then maybe it's not for you.
Real quick, can I just say, I tried to read Paul Dirac once.
I don't even know who that is.
He's a physicist.
Dude,
bro,
no,
I literally couldn't read past the first page. I was like, what is that? I can't.
Physics is not.
But anyway, go ahead.
But his book is about, when you talk about that arc, it's about how to extend the peak of your arc, how to extend it longer.
The arc.
So he said
like the peak, yeah.
Yeah, so there's like two sides of a graph. Like one is your lifespan, which is just like from age 0 to 100, how long you live. And the other is your health span. So like how many of those years are you actually like healthy? Right. Because if the arc goes up, and then let's say your peak health is at 35 years old, and then it just declines from there. How do you extend that peak so that's a longer plateau at the top, so that your health span, you're healthy until you're like 80, and then you want a sharp decline.
Yeah, really.
You don't want the gradual one.
No.
So the whole book is about these tools and strategies of basically how to avoid what he calls the 4 horsemen of disease, which is like cardiovascular disease, cancer, neurodegenerative, and then one other I'm forgetting. And it's all the basic stuff that me and know, exercise, eating, sleep, etc. But one thing that I found was cool was he talked about the centenarian decathlon, which is like 10 exercises, or not even exercises, but 10 movements that you can create your own, but he has his own 10 movements that when you're 80 years old, you want to be able to do effectively. So like one is being able to pick up a 30-pound suitcase and putting it in the overhead bin on an airplane. When you're 80, if you could do that, you're a pretty healthy 80-year-old, right?
Totally.
The other is like rolling around on the floor with your grandkid or something, right? So just being able to roll around. One is being able to like tie your shoes with one leg up. So like standing on one leg, tie your shoes, or be able to bend down to tie your shoes. Like very simple things.
Applicable things.
So it's like, how do you develop an exercise plan when you're 50 or 40 to start building that strength? Like the very deliberate strength. So you're not doing deadlifts and squats, but like, can you do a goblet squat with a 30-pound kettlebell?
It's all kettlebells.
Yeah. So I found that really cool.
Did you, I wanted to ask you about this, like the idea that our relationships, apparently, Chris Williamson was on some show, I forgot what it was. I think it was the Graham something, whatever.
Oh, Iced Coffee Hour?
Yeah. Great episode. And he said in that episode that our relationships outweigh having healthy relationships, good relationships with friends, your wife, your family, just like a life that is full of interaction and relationships. That is the best indicator of a long life. Like regardless of alcohol consumption, regardless of if you smoke or not, like inadvertently saying loneliness is the biggest killer, really. Like that's why people, they stop going to work, their wife dies, they die, right? Because they have no purpose anymore. So it's like, do you think that, ultimately, because even your wife has said that she's had patients who run marathons and take care of themselves and have heart attacks, and guys who are sedentary, eat red meat every day, not have heart attacks, right? Like, do you think that really it just comes down to your relationships ultimately? And yes, you should be healthy and not smoke cigarettes and drink in moderation, but like, it sounds like the science is there. Like you just need good people and good, lively life, like living habits.
I think when it comes to longevity, like living a long life, I'm sure it plays a factor, but it's small. I think in terms of living a fulfilled and happy life, and
which must just turn into a long life.
Yeah, it's good.
Event.
It's having,
you know what I mean?
It's having good mental health.
Yeah,
which is of the 5 critical factors for being healthy. It's exercise, nutrition, sleep, one other, and then the last one is mental health. Yeah. So you're crossing off 20% of that pie.
Right,
of
by just being in a good
healthy life.
mindset. Yeah.
And if you're maximizing that with relationships, it's like what we talked about last week with the Grant study of the Harvard people.
Right,
The people who lived, or I don't know if it was the people that lived the longest. I think it was the people who rated highest on like a happiness scale were the ones who, one, had the most success in life, and two, were the most like content.
Yeah, and their families, they came from good families, like with like love and like all that stuff. Their relationships were healthy. Healthy relationship just means, yeah, you just have a reason to be around, I guess.
Yeah, because like,
so
sure, you could be, you could have 6-pack abs and like be able to run marathons when you're 80, but like,
if your mental health,
if you don't have a best friend
Yeah.
or a partner, like, you're gonna feel pretty lonely, and that's gonna mess.
I just thought that was really interesting. That like apparently that shit will overshadow like a bad habit, having a good relationship. So yeah, I mean, again, not to say you can just be an alcoholic and live forever if you have like a best friend. It's not that, but
certainly
loneliness is a huge. We're social.
large factor.
We're very social animals.
Mm-hmm.
Like you need people around.
You need it, and like, I mean, I experience it every Monday. I work from home every Monday after a weekend of hanging out with friends or family. And Monday, usually it's a pretty light day, so I don't have any like Zoom calls or anything. And like, 4 o'clock rolls around, and I'm like pretty like sad.
Yeah, you're
like randomly.
And you almost like say like, where is everybody?
Yeah, it
like
took me. It actually took me a while because Lauren would come home and I'd just feel like down. It took me a while to figure out why, and then after a while, she's like, "Yeah, dope. You haven't talked to a single human all day."
You ever do that by like noon? You're like, I haven't opened my mouth yet today.
Yeah, you go to get like a coffee, and you're like, like, oh Jesus!
You're like, oh shit! Sorry, I haven't
said
talked in like
a word.
7 hours. Yeah. Oh man. All right, let's wrap it up.
That
was a great app.
All right, thanks for everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Thank you.
Bye.